Welcome back to After the Ashes, the beautiful Altadena podcast, where we're breaking down legislation and recovery after the fire. This is your co-host, Shauna, here. This is episode 16, The Long Rebuild.
Have we really done 16 episodes
We've
already?
done 16 episodes.
Boy, for the people who have listened to 16 episodes of this.
Thank you. You deserve a long service medal. This is The Long Rebuild, nearing a year and facing what comes next. What are we going to talk about today, Steve? We're going to talk about heading into 12 months. We just spoke in our last episode about how heavy things are feeling. We're going to talk a little bit
side, yeah.
On the emotional side. We're going to talk a little bit about on the pragmatic numbers data side, where we're at on the rebuild as far as what's actually happening in Altadena. Some of the things that are planned for the 1 year, and our very favorite subject, money. Where is it? Where is it coming from?
Yeah,
What's the plan?
That's going to be an interesting one. But I think, do you want to start with that, or do you want to end with that?
Let's end with that. But I think,
Okay.
let's talk about heading into this. I know you had today, before we started recording, Steve said, what do you think happens now? We were looking at some of the numbers and talking about that. And he was like, and now what? What's the next 12 months? And it's anybody's guess.
Well, now people are going to have to actually make good on the promises.
Yep.
This
is where the rubber meets the road.
I think they get between now and the holiday in the new year. But once the parade's over, that's when people are going to start saying, all right,
Yep.
What's going on
I
here?
think we're going to have a bunch of, 1-year anniversary events. I know there are a couple already planned.
Yeah,
There's the concert.
We're doing the run.
Oh, there's the run. There's a concert. There's all of these things. So I think there's going to be a little bit of that resurgence of that energy, right?
Yeah, I
that
gotta get in shape to do the 10K.
Steve tried to do a 5K and
I used to run 5Ks,
was
problem.
nearly dead.
Oh,
But I'm not going to talk shit because I've run a few marathons, and if I had to go around the block right now, I'd probably fall over. I had to go back to the gym yesterday, and I was struggling with my free weights, so I'm going to zip it over here. My glass house.
The only marathon I did was
shall
I
remain.
did 26 miles across Catalina.
Oof.
That was a long one.
It is one.
That was legit. And I said, I'll never do another marathon again.
I did the LA Marathon, and after training for and doing the LA Marathon, which I thought was going to kill me and that I would never do that again, I was like, actually, I really liked it. I'm kind of like an anti-sports person. I never did team sports. It was not my thing. The look on Steve's face. Steve is about to die of laughter over here.
Play well with others line. That was so easy.
It's true. I did not play well with others. Only child. What can I say? So, largely, I didn't think I would get into running, but I did at 30. I was 30 when I ran my first marathon. I'd literally never run a mile in my life. And then I trained for a marathon, ran that marathon, loved it, did a few more, including the San Francisco Women's Marathon that kicked my ass. And I was thinking about that one because the race medal for that one was, because it was the women's marathon, it was a little Tiffany's heart. And it was presented to all of the women runners at the end of mile 26 by a large group of firemen. They had the San Francisco Fire Department out there, all the firemen.
They had their shirts on, I presume.
They did. Unfortunately, they did. Sorry, I shouldn't objectify anyone, including our first responders who actually do their jobs. So they were out there. It was great. But I share that because it was bizarrely one of the only things that survived on my property. I mean, my property burned so hot, there was like nothing, no signs of porcelain sinks and cast iron bathtubs, like just bizarrely nothing. All of that was just molten metal. But my tiny, I don't know how, there was like one little area that must have somehow not quite burned as hot, because the attic where a couple of holiday decorations were in a storage bin, when that came down and sandwiched on top of the bedroom below, and where I had a jewelry cabinet and a box with all of my race medals and what have you, my LA Marathon medals, all of that, in that one little pocket, there were a few kind of recognizable remnants. Not much, but a few pieces from that one little pocket in the attic and that one little pocket in that jewelry box. And it was wild to see that. It was there. And a local artist, Sam, I wish I could remember Sam's last name to shout, them out, did a really beautiful piece of like close-up on black background photography of things that survived. And on my property, it was like one teacup from my mother's china set that was all, porcelain and the platinum etching had all turned red. It's a trip. A piece of jewelry that was a jade medallion that jade turns white. That metal that is just like corroded and distorted, but that little tiny Tiffany's heart. And the most bizarre, in hanging from my completely charred black burn trees, not a single tree on my property survived, and one of my massive mature trees that was just completely a burnt twig. Hanging from it completely intact was a wooden birdhouse.
It's
no rhyme or reason, folks. And I have that.
Fact is stranger than fiction.
And so I have those photographs. Anyhow, it's kind of wild. But, the question is like, what happens now, right? What happens next? I think we're going to have the resurge of this energy and this community spirit next year as we all kind of rally for each other. But, also at a year, where are we at? Right. And so talking about specifically some of the events. Actually, before I get into like how the rebuild's going, and we're going to talk about that, and before you get into talking about DC and again the question of money, as we look at all these 1-year events, and there's so many of them, we were thinking about doing something, like our beautiful Altadena team with my co-admins, and everyone was like, you know what, Shauna, we're fucking tired, like going to bed at 8 o'clock and waking up at 8 a.m, exhausted, tired, like an existential exhaustion that is so beyond that no one wants to be apathetic, but it's like, we don't have it in us. We just don't. I know one of the other things beyond the run and some of the other events, one thing that came up is the Dawes concert, right? So for anyone who doesn't know Dawes, they are an indie band, who's, I don't know if he's the lead singer. I think he is, but he's married to Mandy Moore, both of whom Altadena residents. Their home survived. It was damaged. I think they lost the ADU on their property or something or a garage. Like they lost part of the property, but their house survived. Anyhow, impacted and are having this concert that is on January 7th, on the anniversary, that is going to be a benefit concert for the Altadena Foundation for Rebuilding, which of course prompted a lot of people because, post-fire aid money and a lot of cynicism around where the hell that money has gone to. People were like, what is the Altadena Foundation for Rebuilding and how does that actually benefit me? That's the question being asked in the community. And, Steve, you and I were talking about this, that it's actually part of PCF.
It's our contribution that we got from the fire aid money.
Correct. So, that's where that money will go. But it begs that question still of like, where is this money going? People are living in their cars. People who've run out of ALE are living in their cars. People with children are living in their cars because they're not getting insurance dollars. They're not getting support. They're not getting FEMA money. They're not getting, anything from private orgs. And so, it's hard not to wonder where the fuck this money is going. And, you don't want to be cynical about, another fire survivor having an event to commemorate this and wanting to raise money. But, it is like trickle down economics. I mean, and we all know how effective that is. This money is going from org to org to org to org because there's no way or mechanism for anyone to just give cash grants. In fact, I feel like the only people doing that, bluntly, is Heavenly Hughes at My Tribe Rise, who has received fire aid grant money and has literally taken that money and turned it directly into direct cash aid for people in the community.
Yeah, look,
I don't think anyone else is doing it.
I think the holidays is going to present that period of time where a recalibration is going to have to be made. The elections, I think, are going to have some effect on some of these questions because I think, in fact, I don't think any of this is actually really good for Altadena. I think it's the opposite, unfortunately. But I think the deficiencies are going to still be there come January 7th, a year from,
Yep.
And the fundamental problems we've been talking about for the past 6 months still remain, right? The federal government's not bringing in any money. And we'll talk about a potential path forward, but it's not a good path forward. The foundations are still under tremendous pressure. They're not going to change. I think, the communities, the donor classes, they're moving on. And I think it's just you're waking up and you're looking around and you're seeing the reality of what we're dealing with is that we're still here in the midst of it all. Everybody else is kind of moving on to the next thing. And especially as 2026 evolves and the midterms become more of an issue, we've already seen the nationalization of state and local politics through the county's emergency declaration related to ICE, through Prop 50. It's a winner right now. Things like Altadena don't matter unless you make it somehow national.
Yep. That is a sad reality. And I think also as we hit that 1 year, it's time to really look at where are we really at on the rebuild? Where are we really at with getting any kind of accountability or answers
for
what went wrong so that we can move forward?
The media is calling out our governments, and it's just like, okay, that news cycle will pass and then we'll move on. Mm-hmm. And it's actually a very scary time because it just it's telling them there's less and less accountability.
Right.
And in the ballot box, they're getting reaffirmed with record numbers. I mean, Gavin Newsom's sitting there with a 64% win on Prop 50 or 60, whatever the number was. And he's sitting there going, look, I'm getting more votes. And again, we already talked about that. That may not be necessarily true, maybe a little bit. But, there's no consequence right now. And without consequences, people are going to continue to do the same thing over and over again, whether it's a child or whether it's an adult.
Yep. Which is why some of us keep screaming from the rooftops that we need accountability, something meaningful. Nobody's going to go to jail, even though people should go to jail over what happened here. But at the very least, lose your fucking job, right? How are you still getting paid $500,000 a year and not doing your job?
Well, I think more what's scary is, regardless of the person in there, it's the fact we're not seeing changes. We're not seeing the McChrystal report really didn't move the needle.
No, it didn't. But because it wasn't intended to. But they thought that they were going to do that and continue to brush this under the rug.
Which they are.
Well, they're trying to do, but there are a lot of us who are still out there really vocal about this, it's not acceptable.
So one thing I've learned about government, and they like to do, and anybody who's dealt with government at the highest levels knows, they lean on you, right? When they want to win something, they just lean, and they just wait for you to get fatigued. And 99 times out of 100, people will get fatigued.
100%.
They'll walk away.
Yep, but they haven't met me or Altadena. Altadena is a dog with a bone right now. And we're not dropping it. We are a community. We are a very unique community that includes a lot of activists, and people are not going to rest until this is addressed, because it has to be addressed.
So this is where I'm getting to. And I think that, unless we create the alternative, unless we create that parallel universe that I've been talking about for a long time, where we put them on their heels, it's not just sitting here. They can take the hits. They're okay to take the hits. They know that's the game. But what we have to do is now move beyond the hits and say, no, not only what you're doing is wrong, but now this is the direction we have to go that's right. And make them have to tell us no. Mm-hmm. That's the shift that has to happen.
I agree. No, I agree.
And activism is not very good at making that shift.
I agree with you, which is why specifically, at least the group that I have been working with, and I constantly talk about, because I think it's important, Altadena for Accountability has really looked very specifically at one campaign goal, not being distracted by the 100 other tactics we would like, including, camping out at Moroni's house, which I'm not opposed to, but, to ultimately move a needle, there needs to be something actionable done. And that is an investigation, a real investigation with teeth, because we haven't had that. So I think as we go into the 1 year, like you said, it's like, this is where the rubber meets the road. There needs to be something has got to give. Or
people have to deliver.
Correct.
There are promises that have been made.
That's right. They've
all
gotta
the way
deliver.
up from senators
Yep.
to supervisors who have made
That's
promises to many different
Big
people.
promises.
Now those promises have to happen.
Right.
And, I think what I've been saying a lot on my Substack, even back to April and March, or the end of March, beginning of April, and so on, is that I think Altadena really is a microcosm of some of the broader trends that we're seeing nationally and at the state level and in our politics today, right? We're at a point where substance has to start to evidence itself.
Mm-hmm.
And what that substance looks like, that's really going to be the question. And what does that mean for us? How can we influence that substance? And that's what I've been trying to do. I've been doing it for years. Like, that is my job. And I think that that's what the community has to determine, because otherwise we're going to be left behind. We're letting those without the substance control it. And frankly, they just want to keep the old.
Right. It benefits them to maintain the old power structure.
Indeed.
Which we've talked about a lot. So let's talk about how the rebuild is going, because I think that people are really curious about this. For anyone who's curious, 735 permits have been issued. 520 unique parcels have permits. So that's interesting, because that means multiple permits on one parcel. So effectively, 520 rebuilds are in process with permits. But who is actually building? There are 334 active new builds ongoing that are to a point where they are requesting inspection. So, depending how you want to look at it, it's that 334 to 520 number of thousands. I know we keep hearing that like Malibu's in the shit with just their 11 permits issued. But if you run the numbers of how 520 permits, or even at 735, or no, let's say 520 because it's unique parcels. So if you look at that 520 number comparative to the number of structures lost here, and that 11 number in Malibu compared to number of structures lost in Malibu, the percentages are about the same. It's 2 to 3%. That's where we're at, folks.
Well, but again, how many have applied? And I'm just playing devil's advocate.
Yeah, no, of
how
course.
How many have actually applied versus how many are still waiting?
I think that's irrelevant, though. It's because the point
we had
is
9,300
this is where we're at.
Yeah, we all know they're going to have to scale up, and
Yep.
The question is how quickly are they going to get there, or is there something else that's going to happen? And I think the next 6 months will be very telling in that respect.
I agree, and actually, I need to give credit where it is due. We are actually up from our 2% number to 5.7%. So, to be fair, we have seen an improvement. But, that's in 10 months. We've gone from 1%
I got
to
her
2%.
To, actually give a little credit.
I like to be factual.
I know. I'm deep.
And especially for myself. And when I make mistakes, I like to be really clear that I fucked up and correct.
Yeah. I do it all the time.
Me too. Amen. It's the only way to learn and get better. But anyhow, that's where we're at. That's where we're at in the rebuild. And for anyone who's curious about this info, you can follow it. I actually had Public Works confirm for me this morning directly that they update this multiple times a day. So that dashboard is accurate, and the dashboard is the permitting progress dashboard at the LA County Recovers website. Anyone who would like to look at that can find it at recovery.lacounty.gov. That's again, it's recovery.lacounty.gov. And you can keep tabs yourself. There are a number of graphs and infographics to kind of see where things are at. It's a really well done site. I will, again, credit where credit is due. I think this is one of the things the county has done that is much better than past. Have you seen this, Steve?
Yep.
Yeah.
You sent it to me.
Yep. It looks great. I mean, you can see that they're of new residential. 465 are new single-family residences, 0 for multifamily, 114 are for accessory dwelling units. So that's how you get that individual parcel number or unique parcel that I was talking about, because it would be one permit for the primary structure and one permit for the ADU. You have separate of that 139 accessory structures, 40 that are repair only, 4 that are miscellaneous, 0 currently for non-residential. There's a lot going on that you can follow here, and it's really interesting to see the data like this, laid out like this. And they show here also 6,571 damaged parcels, 7,417 damaged, destroyed units. That's units. So those are of our multifamilies. And that really, I think that seeing those numbers are really helpful, because then you start to really understand what was lost here. You know, this is beyond this is, again, more than 20,000 displaced. Yeah. This is how we get there.
Oh, this is
the numbers are staggering. And I think, you know, for me at least, it just reiterates what I've been saying for some time, is that, you know, the reality is many of our neighbors are not going to come back, even those who have been on the fence or who have said that they have intent to return or they plan to return, you know, ultimately are not going to have the resources to do so, because it is so challenging, time consuming, and expensive to rebuild, which people are discovering right now. I had a big post in our group that blew up with a lot of traction, was someone talking about the fact that they wanted to break down what their rebuild looked like and what it had cost them before they even got to a permit, in paying inspection fees, fire fees, Pasadena Unified School District fees, and doing all this. They were like, and then of course you have architectural fees, engineering, your soil reports, all of the work you had to do to get there, including bringing in some cases, having to bring soil back in and do compaction because of what was excavated, because of all the contamination and fire debris. It is a lot. It's so significant, both the time and the money, just to even get to where you can even consider the actual physical rebuild.
Well, and I'm hearing people are, you know, the process is changing in flight too.
Correct.
So, you know, you may get an initial permit and then they're changing the permit requirements on you. I mean, we hear all kinds of stories, and I think we're going to hear all kinds of stories. And I mean, I don't envy anybody having to manage this. It's going to be tremendous.
It is tremendous. And good luck. I mean, again, I think it goes back to what we've been saying across multiple episodes, but very specifically in this one, that this is where the rubber meets the road.
Yep.
This is it. And I think that's going to be increasingly, as we talk about, like, what's going to happen in year 2, what's going to happen from January 26 to January 27. I think we're going to see a lot of focus on people having to make hard decisions about whether or not they're going to take the shitty SCE offer, because that's the best case scenario for them. Or if they have it in them and have the ability and the time to continue to push through litigation to get to a larger number. But, you know, a lot of folks, including myself, are waiting on and dependent upon that settlement money to rebuild. So, you know, we are all in kind of this holding pattern to see what's going to happen. So I think we're going to see more rebuilds coming up, more permits issued. But I also think we're going to see it become more and more apparent the degree to which things are kind of stagnating, that a lot of lots just sitting around. And we've also talked about, too, the number of lots that are going to sit around deliberately outside of developers buying and holding, like our good friend Edwin Castro, who everyone wants to paint as some sort of community hero, when the guy has literally done nothing for Altadena and has been very clear that what he's doing is not philanthropy. The 15 lots that he spent $10 million on, or was it 10 lots and 15 million? My dyslexia is getting me. Was it 10 lots and 15 million? Anyhow.
No, it sounds
I think
like
it was, but
around.
I think it may have been the other way around. The lots that he purchased, he plans to sit on for 10 years, empty, and not develop them for a decade, because he thinks it'll take a decade for the community to come back and for him to actually realize, you know, a positive return on that investment. On the flip of that, you also have all of these people who, again, are, you know, stuck because they don't know what to do. And then you also have an entire group of people, I think we've talked about this before, who plan to keep their properties, to keep them in the family, but who do not have intent to rebuild. And I am aware of everyone I know, there's at least one person on their street who is doing that. On my street, there's 2 on my block. So, you know, I think that's going to be another reality. Is we're not, even when we get through rebuild, it's 7 to 10 years when we've seen a significant rebuild, be it new residents, returning residents, developers. I think it's going to be a lot more new residents and developers than anyone realizes.
No, I don't think anybody's questioning that.
People are. People honestly naively believe that the majority of Altadena is coming back. It's not.
So
unfortunately, that data just doesn't.
Well, and here's the thing
hold.
with the vacant lots. At some point, the county can use eminent domain and just take them over.
I know. That's the other. Well, not the ones that are owned and actively in a trust, though. They can force them to keep them clean and tidy.
They have to. Yeah, they're going to have to do something with the lot. They can't just.
But that's what we're going to be living with.
Yeah.
It's. Nothing will ever be the same. And while we're talking about, the rebuild, there's also been a lot of frustration that the buildings that are going up, how large they are in proportion to their lots. The fact that they are right up against easements and against, property lines. And, a lot of that is SB9. And, I've had a couple of conversations directly with the county about SB9. And bluntly, it's a lot of finger pointing at the state that this is how Newsom wrote it and we can't do anything about it. And the Palisades can have it, their way where they're not having any application of SB9 because all of the Palisades is considered a high fire hazard and all of Altadena is not. And therefore we can go ahead and do this. When in reality, if the county wanted to suspend this, the county could suspend this. But the county doesn't want to suspend this because they want densification because it increases the tax base.
Look, we all know what this is all about. So
money.
Yeah, which brings us to the next piece. All right, so one of the things that I was in D.C. last week and met with a couple of the electeds from California. And one of the things that was talked about was the CDBG, the Community Development Block Grant Disaster Relief Money. Now, for those of you that don't know what that means and then you just heard an acronym and you're rolling your eyes, that's the federal money that everybody's been waiting on. That's the big kahuna, the $40 billion that the governor asked for, that our philanthropic communities and organizations have been waiting around, and everybody's been lined up. That was what AB 797 was designed to supplement because we had a feeling it wasn't going to be gumming anytime soon, and if it did, it would be at a fraction of what was expected. So what happened is in August and September, there was some action. So the lobbying that was being done actually potentially could have yielded a result. And what it was there's a housing bill that's being started up in the Senate. And this housing bill is going to permanently authorize the CDBG DR program. What that means is that program will no longer be a supplemental program every year that has to be, that if there's a disaster, then they have to pass a bill. It would already be in existence, and there would be a budget associated with it. For those of you going, wait a minute, this sounds like FEMA, you're right, it does, and it kind of is a problem because we all see how this administration is treating FEMA. However, the Congress has decided they want to do this permanent authorization. So they put it onto a bill that is going to go, which is the National Defense Authorization Act, and that is a bill that always passes every year. So the idea being the Senate side has this provision in it. The House side does not. There's still a reconciliation that has to happen between the two sides. So it's not a given that this is actually going to make it through in the final bill. Also, what this means is that the funding that would go to actually, into this authorization, the money that would be appropriated from Congress is not a given, nor is there any number that's associated with it. So we don't even know how much it would be. And it would be divisible by 50 different states. Each state would get a certain amount. It wouldn't be just California or Florida or Louisiana or the Carolinas. It would be each state would be able to get their share, sort of like FEMA. So what all this means is that we have had a lot of opposition to bringing in new solutions to our fire response because the superstructure in LA and in California has been united behind CDBG-DR. This is the money they wanted to get their hands on from the start. Now that there's a potential that this bill might actually get through and then have to still be funded, it might slow down any alternate solutions to bring in new money. So everybody will stay united behind the front of CDBG-DR money. So for those of you that think this is a good thing, this is a delay.
Yeah.
We don't know how much money this is going to be, nor do we know if it's going to be anywhere near what we need to be able to fix our problem.
And to remind people, our problem is tens of billions of dollars.
There's a reason why the governor asked for $40 billion. Tax increment financing that SB 782 will do does not come close to being able to meet this need. Philanthropy does not have the money to be able to meet the needs of what we're trying to do here, and also continue to fund the philanthropic needs of the broader community. Our state doesn't have the money. This will not get us where we need to go. All it does is it murks up the water even further.
Yeah.
And so that was the big concern that I had when I heard this, because right now our electeds in Washington and everybody else was hoping that we would be able to get a 797 through so that they weren't totally dependent on CDBG-DR reauthorization and all the other things that go with it. So for those of you that just rolled your eyes, understand this does two things. It slows down the process and it doesn't get us the money. It's another nothing burger.
And for context, this is what all of our local orgs have lined up behind, because they were sold, in my opinion, a false bill of goods.
Well,
a lot of promises were made by a number of electeds and others and folks in the county. And, those are going to have to be made good on.
So this is a situation that I think over the next 6 to 12 months we're going to see. I mean, the NDAA, now that the Congress has opened up and we now have a government again functioning, or will have it in the next week, the NDAA should move and they will be in conference. So whether this gets attached to it or not, we'll see. But the key thing too is from other states I've been hearing that they're rolling their eyes at this as well. This is not a panacea in any way, shape, or form. So for those that are being told that, my answer to you is I'd start asking more questions. The reality is right now within the Democratic Party, there's a lot of optimism going into 2026. And the hope is that if they can wait long enough, they might be able to turn the House, maybe the Senate, and maybe get money to California. And that won't be till 27 at the earliest, assuming they could do that, and assuming the president allows it.
Right. And to think that that is not going to delay rebuild of our community is more magical thinking.
The point really comes back to we had the solution to raise the money at scale.
Yep.
And we got vetoed.
Yep.
And the reason you could see there are alternate plans going on. And I'm not saying the two are directly correlated. I'm just saying that we are limited in our options because of choices being made by our electeds. And that was the big takeaway from Washington that I saw. I mean, among the fact the government's now open.
Yeah, and we will not. I will spare you all, Steve and I, arguing on air about our different perspectives on that, because I am very much in the why did our establishment Democrats cave at this point, when what they caved on, they could have caved on 40 days ago prior to this impact on the communities. If you're just going to cave, if you're going to hold a line and make a point, then hold it and let us all sacrifice for something that is a greater good. But if you're just going to cave, what was even the point? But Steve has a very different perspective.
Yeah, I do.
Do you want to share with the class?
Look, I think that it was a stupid fight from the start. I think that healthcare is a horrible issue to fight on. Those of you that read my Substack know I wrote about this yesterday. But I also think that, the point was made that they got the longest shutdown ever. This goes back to why the Republicans had the longest.
The second longest shutdown under Trump's last presidency.
Correct. And look, they're going to get another bite at the apple in January when this temporary reauthorization goes away. The food stamp question, or the SNAP program, is addressed because that's fully funded through the end of the year if this bill goes through. So that takes that leverage piece off the table. And honestly, I think that it was time to to get things going. And I think the pragmatism on the Democrat side said the further this went, the worse it gets. A lot of the noise you're hearing, the people that are the critical, the ones that are screaming about the Democrats have caved, are all running for office. Governor Newsom, Roy Cooper in North Carolina, all the candidates running for Senate in many different places.
AOC
is running for Senate or president. So, I mean, these are all people, Ro Khanna, who's potentially running for president.
Bashir.
Bashir's doing what he has to do. Look, the reality is it's good politics to make noise. Schumer knew that. That's why he and the 8 people that went along with it. Tim Kaine there was a great piece in Politico this morning about Tim Kaine and why he did it. And he was able to get out of the administration and written into the legislation language stopping any more reductions in force because he represents Virginia, and Virginia has a huge population that is, government employed. So, like most politics, it's not as cut and dry as the media narrative wants it to be.
It never is.
There were 8 people that made decisions and probably got 8 separate sign-offs that worked for their state, which is what senators should be doing. People are now going to the situation, and they're supposed to have a vote on whatever the supplemental ACA issue is, where they're with the tax credits that's supposed to come up in the next month. And I think to me, the takeaway on that side, and again, healthcare is a very complicated subject. In some respects, it's also very simple in others. I think that people, if I'm the Republicans right now, they got to come up with a solution. They can't just keep saying no to Obamacare. They can't keep saying no. Healthcare.
I mean, even when Trump, exactly, is a critical issue. But I just want to share that even when Trump, just remind people, was running, he kept getting asked, because he was like, "I'm going to kill Obamacare. We're getting rid of the ACA. We're getting rid of it.
What are you going to have?"
And he was asked repeatedly, like, "What's the plan?" He just kept saying, "We have a plan, and you'll see it soon. We have a plan. You'll see it soon." We still haven't seen the plan because there's no fucking plan.
Well, the plan. So what's really happening, and again, I wrote about a little bit about this in my Substack yesterday, is you're seeing a consolidation in healthcare. And, think about here in Pasadena, right? Cedars-Sinai now owns Huntington. USC owns Arcadia and Verdugo Hills.
Yep.
And so what you're really getting is you're getting these super regional organizations or, healthcare delivery models. And they're all essentially becoming Kaiser Permanente.
Mm-hmm.
The difference is the American system really goes after it from an insurance perspective. And so the question becomes, when will, say, UCLA combine with the other UCs to create a California state insurance policy to utilize their network? That's coming. And when that does, that puts us in a really interesting position to start addressing some of this government-run or government-owned.
Well, we've talked about this a bit in other episodes, that,
Healthcare.
The fact that California, per capita has a state budget that is not that far off of the entire country of Canada,
which has socialized medicine.
It has socialized medicine.
Single
That's effective.
payer.
And
you got to talk to Canadians.
Okay. Arguably, it's effective as it can be. There's always a
there
private
are
component.
Improvements that can be made to the system.
Always.
Yeah.
But my simple point was that there's money. There is money for this. It's what we have the desire and political interest in spending it on. And I think to go back to our, to wrap up our conversation about what happened with this shutdown and the narratives around it, I think that you have a very unique perspective because your perspective is that of a political insider, because that is what you are, because it's literally what you do. But on the perception front of how this looks and how effectively all these people who are up for election are going to spin all of this around the establishment Democrats caving, and that is the spin, and that is what people are going to buy into. That is the narrative people are going to buy into. The Democratic Party has a lot of work to do between now and the midterms, because we either have to find a way to shore this up and to unite the base, or we've lost it again.
But this gets back to, and again, the readers of my Substack have heard me talk about this ad nauseum. It gets back to substance over form. And right now, yes, you're right. The spin will allow you to make good on the form. And this is where the Democratic Party is failing, and this is why the Republican Party failed. That's why we had the swing in 2024 to 2025 of the voters that are sitting there saying, I'm wanting somebody to actually solve the fucking problem.
Right.
And this is just like Altadena. We just want somebody to solve the problem. But as long as nobody's solving the problem, I'm going to go to the guy who's not in power because maybe they can figure it out.
Exactly.
And
this is the constant pendulum shift of our
because
politics.
nobody has the balls to actually go and solve the problem.
Yep.
And the reality is to solve a problem, you have to make tough decisions.
Yep. And you have to piss off powerful people with a lot of money.
Well, you can get through that because money always follows power.
Yep.
What it is that you have a consulting class that has these politicals so afraid of making a mistake, because politicals at the end of the day, if you think about it, you work all your life to be in a position to put yourself into that higher office. And if you do anything that can jeopardize that, that's like you've given up everything that you've made. I mean, to me, I wonder sometimes why politicians aren't more entrepreneurs. Like the amount of work they do to get the minimal amount of money that they do, and the talent it takes to raise the money and be so disciplined in who you are and to get to where you are, that is such a critical thing. But the problem is that we're at a point now in our population and the way we're seeing our politics, at least at this particular moment in history, where people want risk takers. People want people to say,
we just saw this with Mamdani.
But Mamdani is just, he's saying noise. He's not bringing the substance.
I know you think that, but I think he's going to bring substance.
He has to. Because you're not going to be able to do free everything and tax the rich, because that's not the answer. The answer is you got to come up with a way to do this that works for everybody. I mean, again, the example I had with Elon Musk getting $1 trillion payout from Tesla is ridiculous too. Yep. And you wonder why there's so much resentment. I mean, if the dude took $1 billion, he'd still have more money he knows what to do with for his entire lifetime. And that'd be $999 billion that we can use to help shore up our economy or take it and put into a nonprofit. I mean, you'd almost double the amount of assets existing in the philanthropic community. Like, if you don't trust government to do it right, then do it yourself. But don't sit there and just hoard it just so you have the ego of saying, I'm the first trillionaire. Who gives a shit? And that's why people are getting pissed off.
It's the monkey thing. If one monkey hoards all the bananas and other monkeys are starving while one monkey hoards the bananas, you'd say, what the fuck is wrong with that monkey?
But this is why
give the monkey more bananas.
But this is why our society, this is what it comes down to. And this, we talk about affordability. It's not affordability. It's wealth. When people can't buy a home, homes are where people get the majority of their wealth from. That's what matters. We don't use the word wealth because affordability sounds easier. But no, it's about giving people hope, because wealth equals hope. And if you're just giving people money, you're not creating wealth. I've watched enough of this. So,
should we talk about the next topic?
Oh, you got me on my top. You got me all wound up.
I know. Steve's really wound up. I had to wind him up with wind it up. Not because I want him to wind it up, but we could talk for hours about this. And frankly, how broken our system is, not on every level. It's not
but
just
it can
broken
be
enough,
fixed.
but it can be. Yes,
all it takes
exactly.
is leadership.
Correct, and that's the vacuum. We are lacking meaningful leadership.
And I don't buy the excuse the system is broken. It's not broken. We've allowed
it to be this. We've allowed those in power to behave this way and to get away with this shit over and over and over. And I can only hope that the buck actually stops here, at least for us in Altadena, because it's enough. Like they let the entire town burn. Now what? How much worse can it get? I mean, I keep saying it's like this time he didn't just hit you. He hit you, locked you in the house and set it on fire. And, have you had enough yet? I know I've had enough.
Now it's her turn to get worked up.
I do. I get really worked up about this. I get really worked up about county letting us burn for days.
But this is why it's so important that...
And, and our neighbors dying. And I mean, gets into this next topic. It's come up with a couple of journalists reaching out this week asking me, hey, can you speak to, conversations that are happening in your group around deaths and all these people who've passed and, what we look at for the official number, right? We keep seeing the number of 19 deaths related to the Eaton fire. Nearly all the deaths related to all these fires occurred in Altadena. All but one of those deaths was in West Altadena west of Lake, which is where I happen to live or did live. And,
But what we're not talking about when those numbers is that, but what we do talk about in our community groups, I talk about this with our community leaders, we talk about it within our community every day as to how many other people have actually died related to the fire. So you have all the related deaths. And, like, for example, a woman, and I'm going to spare some names because I don't know how families feel about things, but a woman in our community who was very active in the group for a long time and very active in the community for a long time. She was an artist, amongst other things. She lived alone in her home. She was evacuated like, most of us were. Well, she didn't get an evacuation warning, but she, with the help of a neighbor, got out of her home and was taken to the evacuation center at the Pasadena Convention Center. She managed to, and she's a single woman, her and her dog. She's a longtime single woman who was doing just fine in her home. She's not that old. I would guess that she was in her late 60s, maybe 70. She, and in good health, but she managed to contract COVID while at the Pasadena Convention Center. She was then transferred to a care facility from hospital to care facility because she's a single person and had complications, developed pneumonia in that care center and died. All right. That is 100% a death related to the fire that will never be counted in that total. And there are dozens of those that we have seen happen this year. I saw another one of our community leaders talking about the 2 funerals they attended this weekend. I was personally at a service for my friend's grandmother who has been on a steady decline since she had to be evacuated out of the care home on Allen. What was that care facility that went up in flames that we did see?
Something Palms.
Yes, that we saw going up. That's where her grandmother was. And, again, after being moved, her health rapidly declined and she died a couple weeks ago, and we were having her service. We're also not taking into account all of the suicides. We know, I know, again, I'm going to spare names for people because I think that those people and those families deserve that respect. But we have had multiple suicides in our community. One recently, a woman shot herself on her lot. Those things are not being spoken about. They're not being accounted for. They are not going into the total death count. But if we were to take all of those numbers, we are talking about 100 plus Altadenans who have been murdered by the people who started this fire, the people who allowed the fire to continue to burn, and to destroy our community. And again, there has to be there will never be the reckoning that there should be for that. But there has to be some form of accountability and some change that is meaningful enough that we know that this is not just going to happen again. Not to us here in Altadena, but to the next community, because it was us and next it's you. And without change, again, what's the definition of insanity? Just continue to do the same thing and expect a different result. There will not be a different result. The trend is your friend, and the trend here is not good. We're going to have so many deaths by the time we get to the end of this. I'm not even getting into people's pets. So I hate to end on kind of a really fucking depressing note, but that's kind of where it is. And I just wanted to bring that home. And I'm glad that a couple journalists are trying to cover this, even though it's challenging because they don't have data points and they won't. They were like, where can we get this as a data point? You can't and you won't. I mean, you may see it turn up when the numbers are significant enough in a few years as excess deaths, the way we did with COVID, right? During the pandemic. But, otherwise, these folks are never going to be accounted for in that death count, and they absolutely should. And I hope that people continue to talk about that and shed light on it, because that is our reality. We want to remember all those who have been affected by this. Yeah. And, we're coming up on a year. That's exactly. I think, a lot of folks are like, oh, haven't you moved on? Aren't you rebuilding? Your life is great. Or the ones that have been really entertaining are all the people who are hearing from family members and friends they haven't heard from in years out of the woodwork. Like, oh, congrats on your, $2 million windfall, because they've read something that was absolutely not real about the SCE offer and think that people are miraculously getting all this money. No, you're not. Even if SCE's calculation put you at $1 million plus settlement, by the time they do subrogation and then you factor taxes and everything else, it's net zero, or worse, it's less than zero. In my case, it's less than zero. So, it ain't good, folks. But what is good is the small business in our community. So let us end on a happy note. We were talking about in our group about Betsy again, Tyler Wells' spot that was formerly Bernie on Mariposa that's reopened, in the midst of all this destruction. And the fact that this is someone who is doing, unlike Edwin Castro, this is someone who is for real doing something for the community. That was said in our group. And I was like, yes, thank you. I completely agree with that statement.
How packed it is there.
Yeah, of course he's packed because people want to support it. It's great food. Everything's off the wood fire grill. We talked about the fact that would this be hard? A lot of people, including myself, were saying, hey, expected it to be triggering, but actually it's not because it's so comforting to be back in a space in Altadena where when you're inside that restaurant and it's full of people from the community and you run in inevitably to people every time you're there. Every time. It's restorative, right, to be in that space. It is for me. I know I say every time I go home and I call Altadena home, I go home and, I have to do some business on my lot. I follow that up by going and supporting some local business. Like I go to local coffee. I go spend a few dollars at a local shop. I'll have lunch at one of our local spots that's open.
You'll honk at joggers on the middle of the road.
I do. I saw...
scaring them.
I was on the way to the press conference on Friday and I saw Steve jogging because Steve is one of our residents holding it down and I honked at him and I think I scared the shit out of him.
No, I knew. I saw the license plate. I saw the fuck Elon.
So he knew it was me. But anyhow, I bring up Betsy again because I think it's important to talk about those who have remained in the community, who continue to invest in the community despite everything. And Tyler's a really great example of that because not only is he running Betsy and it's doing great and it's packed and it gives community. It's a stake pole, right, in the ground for rebuilding. He is also working on his second spot. He was working on it pre-fire, a second all-day spot that would be 2 doors down right there, also in Mariposa Junction. And that is on track. He is actively working on that and working on getting it reopened. And, I think that is worth celebrating and talking about. On that same vein, Mariposa Junction is actually getting ready to reopen. For those who don't know, that is the historic block owned by Joey Galloway on Mariposa. The beautiful, brick buildings that span two. It's really a full city block, but that whole area is trying to come back. Half the building burned, half of it didn't, but was remediated. On Saturday, November 15th from 10 to 2, Mariposa Junction is hosting a big grand reopening celebration for the half of the block that did stay open, which is, Betsy, obviously, but also Sideca, the Carciofi Design, which is a really great little stationary card shop, Miss Dragon, print and copy.
Yep.
Gotta love Miss Dragon. I know you were just there.
We were just there yesterday.
So, that it's great to see these kind of things happening and to know that, one way or another, the community is moving forward, even if there are fewer of us. Everyone's doing what they can. I'm also going to shout out 2 more businesses quickly. Altadena Watch Company, just known as Altadena Watch Co. Such an awesome jewelry repair. Has been recommended in our group for years. The owner's sound is great. They have reopened. I think I may have mentioned them before, but I'll mention them again. Someone was asking for where to get something repaired and it was Altadena Watch Co. So a reminder that they're open and a reminder too that both of our local veterinarians are back in business, both Dr. Vanderhoof and Dr. Dawson at Vanderhoof Veterinary and also Dr. Sahi at Altadena Pet, which is also on Lake. All of these businesses are on Lake north of New York Drive. So, and south of Altadena. So yeah, Altadena Pet, Vanderhoof Vet, and Mariposa Junction. More of our local businesses holding it down.
All right.
That's it for today.
All right. Thank you, Mayor Dawson.
You're welcome. So next up will be episode 17, which we will record next week.
Can you believe we've gotten this far?
I can believe we've gotten this far.
It's crazy.
Steve's always like, are we going to have anything to talk about? And then our 30 minutes episodes run for an hour and we're like, oh shit, we do still have things
I got a lot to talk about. It's just, keeping it Altadena.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
There is a lot to talk about and there will continue to be. So stay tuned. Until then, you can find us online, Beautiful Altadena on Substack, on Instagram, our locals only Facebook groups,
also exist in our subgroups. And we're also kind of slowly bringing back book club and women's groups and cooking and all that. So if you're local or you were local in January and just want to reconnect with your Altadena people, come find us. Even if you hate Facebook, it's the one reason to be on there. It's the one reason I'm on Facebook. We'll make it worth your while. And if you have any commentary, questions, concerns, things you want us to talk about, you can always hit us up by email. As a reminder, beautifulaLtadenaOG@gmail.com. And of course, you can find Steve
at the Alta Policy Wonk on Substack.
Steve, don't sound so excited about your blog.
I mean, after you, I'm like, I don't think there's any room left for me.
There's so much room for you because Steve is like the most prolific writer I think I've ever encountered. Steve posts at least once a day. I say at least because sometimes when there's things to talk about, Steve will post 2 or 3 times a day. Meanwhile, I'm over here trying to like get my head around one giant post.
That's because you got to manage 50 different platforms.
True. It's true. Well, on that cheery note, we'll see you next time.
All right.
Find us on one of those 50 platforms.
And again, to all those veterans out there, thank you.
Yes. Thank you for your service. Happy Vets Day.
All right. Bye now.